come in, tell us where you're dialing in from this morning in the chat. Introduce yourself to the folks who are here. We hope this will be a more engaging session.
All right, now we're live on YouTube. Excited to see who can join us from there as well today. It's been pretty cool to get people from Zoom and YouTube get combined in the conversation the past few weeks in our past events.
Cool. Yeah. Welcome Tim.
Hey,
welcome
Erica.
you too.
Rochester, Minnesota. MKE. You got to help me with the abbreviations
Milwaukee.
here. Milwaukee. Here we go. Okay. Right on. Perfect.
Hey Eddie.
North Carolina. Nice.
Welcome, man. So we're kind of spread out. I'm in Green Bay.
Ryan?
I'm in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Robert.
Yep, I'm down in Austin, Texas. So I'll stretch the map a little bit. And where are you coming in, Jacob? Are you in Green Bay as well?
Oh yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I'm in Green Bay, well, technically De Pere, but yeah, Green Bay area.
Perfect.
Matthew, man, how's it going? Thanks for joining. Hey, Wendy.
Where is ATW good? I'm not the only one. I'm afraid to ask more of the acronyms.
I think that's. I was just looking to the airport lookup. It looks like Appleton, but we'll see.
Appleton. Right. Looks like you did get it. Yeah. Perfect. Couple more minutes and we'll get started. Everybody, again, feel free to introduce yourself and where you're dialing in from. And we'll start about the 5-minute after mark.
But when you can't decide between the Filet-O-Fish or the Big Mac, and he says,
"I'll get you both."
Thank you.
Oh, Robert, you got the Spotify ads. I forgot about
Getting
that.
An advertisement.
It's okay,
all right, folks.
The secret's out. We use Spotify.
Sponsored by. Yeah, no.
That's great. We can do like jokes on top of the commercials, right?
Right.
Anybody remember Mystery Science Theater 3000?
Mm-mm.
Oh yeah, they'd watch these old movies. And they'd make fun of it.
He's from Green Bay, actually. That guy.
Really?
Yeah, he's from the Green Bay area. He went to UWGB, and then I don't know where he is now, but yeah, it's just kind of crazy. All right, I think we'll get started in about 1 more minute. We're just letting folks get a chance to hop in. I know sometimes it's hard to get here on the dot, and then we're letting folks, hop in also to the YouTube live stream as well. So welcome. Just as a reminder, this is going to be recorded, and be sure to introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't yet. Excited to know who's here, what you're working on, and stuff like that.
Now we got some like cool elevator music.
Smooth jazz. It's a great way to start. Yeah, nice. Matthew's enjoying it as much as we are.
All right, Robert, I think we can roll back the music and get started.
All right. Yep. That's right. I'm playing Maestro here. Okay.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, it's all good. Well, thank you everybody for being here. We're super excited to have Robert and Ryan, talk about learning loops and a framework that they've been using to innovate new product ideas and all sorts of things around that. So before we get started though, as a reminder, this will be recorded and be available on our YouTube channel. And we'll also send you an email if you're joining us here on Zoom with a link to the recording and any other resources we may talk about today. If you have any questions, be sure to submit them in the Q&A panel. We'll try to catch them in the chat, but the Q&A panel is the best way for us to track those. And definitely ask questions throughout the presentation. We want to have some engagement and to be able to just kind of dig into things that are really on topic in that moment. And if you have any questions after today, feel free to reach out to us at ahoy@headway.io, as you can see on the screen right here. So as I think that's everything. So I think I can hand it off to Robert.
Perfect. Thank you, Jacob. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're dialing in from. Rob Kaminski here from Austin, Texas. And really what we're diving into today is a series we're putting on called Exploring Product. And this is something that Ryan and I will be running. We hope to do these throughout the year. A little bit of mixed model. We hope to get some folks in here, different entrepreneurs, CEOs, folks who are working in the product and strategy space, especially to get to the reality that is product work, which we know is this really big surface area from idea generation to prototyping to testing to research and everything included. And we want to be able to shed some light on the reality of that work, not only to help each other, but to build and learn from each other as we go. And as Jacob hit on, we don't want this to be a presentation. We do have some light content that we're going to share in terms of the model, but we want this to be almost like an office hours, real laid back, as you can tell. The music sets the tone. But we want to get into the nitty gritty. And even with the work that Ryan and I do day in, day out with different entrepreneurs and innovation groups, it's messy. It's never really clear. And we want to shed some light on that and be able to talk through the nuances. And so again, glad to be here. And want to introduce Ryan, my colleague, our head of product here at Headway. Ryan, you want to introduce yourself and get your 2 cents on exploring products? I'm excited.
Yeah. Hey, thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate taking time out of your day. Ryan Hatch. Yeah, we're excited for exploring product because there's such a, Robert and I talk about, there's such a big surface area in product, in launching a new company and launching a new venture. And it's hard and no one has it figured out. And we don't want to pretend that other people or us even have it all figured out. But we're wanting to get real with you, be authentic about, hey, here's what we do, here's how we approach it. And we're going to be having other people on as well and bringing other guests on the show to get different perspectives on, hey, how they're doing it, right? Yeah. And this is meant to be a conversation. So Robert and I just kind of be going through some light content and then riffing together, right? And you're going to be probably hearing us interrupting each other. And well, that's not what and we're going to have a dialogue and it's going to be great. And we welcome you to join the conversation as well as we explore product together.
Good stuff. Thanks, Ryan. And so if you don't know Headway, a little bit about us, we work with entrepreneurs and corporate innovation groups to bring new business to market and keep them there. And so we really are covering the spectrum of not only who we work with, but the different industries and spaces where we go and build strategies and execute and build and prototype. And that's what we want to share. We are consistently putting out different content to our audience. And so be sure to check us out, subscribe to our channels, reach out to us at social media. We're extremely active in that space and we want to continue to do that, especially into this year. And so again, the light content, but we want to kind of get into our mindsets and how we think about things. And so I want to kick off for something that I know I'm really passionate about. I know Ryan is as well. First principles in building new products, new businesses. And these are things that it frustrates me that they don't get enough light in execution. And so I want to walk you through 2 key things before we share our kind of thinking model for how we start to unpack some of this stuff. And so the first one is, it's going to seem trivial, but humans are at the epicenter. No one talks about it, but businesses and products don't exist in a vacuum. They're here to serve us as very irrational and emotional animals out there in the way we make decisions. And the further away we get from this epicenter and how we make decisions of what we build and why we build it, the more difficult it is to be successful and execute and build sustainable businesses. And so a couple key things here. I'm going to be pulling us back into the human side, especially when we get into strategy often through the series. Humans are, maybe irrational is too aggressive, but it gets the point across, is we're not always built by logic-based decisions. We're complex animals where emotions apply in our buying behavior and our activities. And Ryan and I talk about this in every project and nearly every call because it's just so important. And tied into this is it's open-ended, that even if we are to get some sense of understanding of how people are making decisions, it's usually more complex than that, even for what we uncover, because everything's intertwined and connected at the human level. And so big piece for us that we think about early and often as we go through building new products.
Yeah, and you know, in on the business side, it's funny because Robert and I talk about, well, the goal of business is to make things repeatable and 100% bulletproof. And you know, the interesting thing about predicting the future is if it's all based on, you can build a system, but you have to build it around this shaky foundation of humans. And humans, if you ask someone why they do something, they don't really know why. They rationalize the why. And we have to understand that, like, we're really trying to figure out humans here. And there's different types of problems in the world. And we'll probably do a session just on this sometime. And the type of problems that we're solving in product, they're not math equations, right? We're trying to understand people and build things around people. And people have habits. They don't do necessarily the things that benefit them most. There's a whole lot more to talk about, but I love the point.
So this fires me up too, because it gets me into the next piece here. And there's no roadmap. There is no step-by-step process for bringing new products to market. You know, there's good, perhaps, mental models, and we have one we want to share, but they're imperfect, and it's really meant to uncover in times where it's uncertain. What gets me fired up here, and anyone who's ever been on a product team or a new business venture team, especially in large organizations, they think it's an execution kind of concept of, if we do these 10 things in order and we hit all our milestones, like, we'll be successful. We're here to tell you it doesn't work like that in the wild. You know, that works really well for things that already work. And so if you've ever worked for a large company where it is efficiency, it's processes, yeah, that's great if you've already done the hard work of getting a new product or thing in the hands of a customer and you haven't paying for it. And so the work's just different. And this is where I think corporate world and startups collide. It's why startups are winning, because they don't care about efficiencies, they care about effectiveness, and can we go 0 to 1. And so I get fired up. You could tell in my emotions. I've worked across the spectrum. I've worked for the big conglomerate. Oracle is an experience I had, all the way down to startups raising. And so kind of seeing that between this really gets me fired up on, there is no roadmap. I don't know if this triggers anything for you, Ryan, in this space here.
Yeah, and all the time, people are going to ask, well, what's the plan? And they want a Gantt chart. It's just like, that's not reality, people. For innovation, that's execution world, and innovation is a different space. It's not execution, it's search, it's exploration, right?
Yep, 100%. And so this kind of lays the foundation, to some degree, of exploring products. As these first principles, these are things we're constantly going to be pulling back, but it's a decent segue into how we think about it. And so what we're calling it the learning loop. This is a mental model that Ryan and I talk through early and often as we go through projects. We want to share it with you today. And like we said, parts of it are, this whole work is ambiguous. And so we're going to talk through kind of pitfalls, where people get stuck, where teams get it right and wrong as we go through. But Ryan, why don't you at least take us through the high level of this thing, and then we'll open it up and get into the weeds here.
Sure. Yeah. So when we think about products and taking something to market and innovation, there's a lot of stuff out there that'll tell you, here's the right way to do it, and here's the right way to do it. And you got buzzwords kind of all over the place. There's buzzwords all over. And it's like, how do we make sense of all that? There's design thinking, there's lean startup, there's jobs to be done. There's a lot more stuff as well. And what we've tried to do is think about, okay, if we zoom out, if we zoom out, what's the model that we're really using in our heads, that we're applying kind of innately, because we're in this space, we're doing it all the time. If we externalize that, what's that model we're actually stepping through? And we feel this is it, and feel pretty confident about this. I don't really think this is going to change. I think this is pretty solid, but there's not one right mental model, right? There's a lot of different mental models, and you need them all. And we're just offering this as another one. It's something that we're using all the time when I'm looking at a problem, when we're looking at a problem. I'm always thinking in my head, where am I right now in this diagram? And if I don't have the right pieces on this diagram, then I know I can follow that model to bring me to the right place, to help me ask the right questions that'll put us in the right spot.
All right. So take us through that. Take us through these steps here. Introduce these concepts, and then we'll hash through them.
So the first one, like vision, it always has to start with the why. Well, we love making prototypes. We love being in solutions. We get excited about ideas. But if we don't pause and back up and say, why? Like, what are we really trying to do here? And so many times this isn't talked about. This isn't defined. And I've seen where it causes a lot of problems down the road. If you're not locked into why you're doing what you're doing, it can really hurt you. And there's several examples of this. Do you want to be in, whether it's sitting down with a client or a startup, or a corporate, all of those conversations, you kind of have to bring it back and say, hey, do you want to be this one? You want to make this a lifestyle business, right? You and 2, 3 other, 5 other people. Do you want this to be, a $5 or $10 million business? Do you want this to be a $500 million business? And those are all super different. And based on that vision of where you're trying to go and why, that completely changes the actions you take, completely changes the decision matrix we would use to go this direction versus that direction. Right.
You know what this makes me think of, Ryan, is really the element of constraints. And what you talk about of like, what do I want to be? Who do I want to serve? It's the first constraint. And anyone who's ever gone through any creative process knows that when you have all the tools at your disposal, all colors, all shapes, all sizes, what happens? Nothing. You get stuck. There's too many options. And so I think about starting to frame the boundaries of what are we about to do? Why are we even building this product or business and who it serves as the first constraint so that we can make decisions. And then the examples you laid out, solo entrepreneur, you're going to make some decisions that are probably a little bit more scrappy from the tools you choose and what you build versus the person who wants to raise $100 million and get into some advanced tech. Like those are just different paths that could even be applied to a similar space where you're creating new products. So that's how I think about this one. It's really, really important.
Yeah. And like, so I'll just shoot a couple examples on this and why it's so important. I had an innovation team I was working with, and the sponsor for this team, the executive sponsor, it's a corporate. The executive sponsor came to the team and had it all figured out. Here's the solution. I want this team to go build this solution, right? And so I had a one-on-one with this executive sponsor before we brought the team in. And in the one-on-one, I just said, you know what? Your solution sounds amazing, right? I'm not fighting you on it. Like this could be the right thing to do. Yeah. But I asked him to back up into this vision space that we're talking about. And there's this one question that I would encourage you to ask to help you find what is the vision, what is the why. I asked him, hey, so assuming this solution works, right? Assuming that your idea is the right thing to do, how would you know when you're successful? How would you know when you're successful? And he said, well, when customers stop leaving the company. When our customers, retention was it. And that reframe changed the entire game, right? Because then I could say, okay, if your goal is retention, that's one potential solution, but there's a whole bunch of other opportunities. Let's do an inventory. It helps us ask the question now, why are people leaving? Yeah.
And so to me, you're doing the connection here, which is terrific, into this next big piece, opportunity theory. And so, when I first saw this, what is this? This is abstract, right? Like break this down for me. Like, what is opportunity theory? How should I think about that? How do you think about it?
Yeah. So we all have different ideas. We all have different thoughts on where we should go, what the solution should be, who the target customer should be, all those things, what the business model should be, all those things. The word we're using right now, it could change, but the word we're using is, what's your theory about the opportunity? What do you think it is, right? We call it opportunity theory. And that could be all these different assets that we use in product. I would put them all in this bucket because they're all the things that you think are where the opportunity lie. Like who's the target customer? What's a persona for that potentially, right?
And so when you say tools, you're thinking business canvas, business model canvas,
All those
customer segment maps, like anything, any assets
journey
you have
maps,
around.
any assets you have, business models, all that stuff. And also your solution concepts, your wireframes, or your flows, all of that stuff. And this covers 2 spaces, right? Because there's a lot of stuff in here, but there's different spaces in here. There's the solution space, the problem space. All of that stuff rolls into what you believe to be true about, hey, where I think the opportunity is.
Yeah. The last thing for me on this one in particular is write it down and share it. You would not believe how often folks just keep this in their head and they assume that everyone's going to follow along with all the knowledge they have. Yeah. And so whether it's market research, conversations you've had, quotes you've picked up, the business model stuff, by documenting it, it makes it real. It takes it from like, oh, it's perfect. And for me, it's that theory. You have to have the mindset of this isn't fact. This is just a theory. And what this opens up, and we're going to talk at length, is some of the activities you do to move it from theory into like a fact and execution and all those things and what it looks like. And so,
totally. There's other really, really great product people that we greatly respect. And a lot of those things fall into here. There's all sorts of, advanced customer journey maps where you're doing empathy at the same time. In my mind, that fits in here. Teresa Torres, she has her opportunity tree, right? That fits in here. Yeah. And it's all about, and even Teresa would talk about, to riff on Robert's idea, you need to externalize it. I couldn't agree more, because if you have a co-founder, if you have other people on your team, or whoever you're working with to make this happen, they're probably thinking about it differently than you are if you're not writing it down. We all have different views on where the opportunity is, and externalizing that and seeing it together is really helpful.
And it's uncomfortable. The least, especially we see this as a repeat loop, but when you first start doing this, your concept, your research of the problem space, solution space it's never going to be as worse as it is day one. And so what I've seen in practice is, as people try and document this, they kind of stuck at it because they don't want to be wrong. And so even if they have a half-baked concept, like they won't put it down, don't do that. So you need to be able to lay it all out there to communicate it. And then also bringing us into the next piece and how we think about it, to extract the risk of what's going on. So Ryan, take us through this one on, you have your opportunity theory, and then, what are we doing next in this mental model?
Yeah. So you have your vision of where you want to go and why. You have, the different paths you could take to get there, the opportunity theory, and all of that. But then you kind of need to do a gut check. And like, this is where a lot of people honestly don't do well at this stage. Like, there's this transition from what you thought to be true to what if I'm wrong? Right. And that vulnerability piece, it's real, and it's an emotional thing. Robert, we talk about every entrepreneur, there's these 2 roles, these dual roles when you're launching something, right? There's the promoter in you that wants to just go take the opportunity theory and just go tell the world what you think, right? And start pitching and promoting. But the other side of it, and those are valuable. You need that side of it. Yeah. But you also need the ability to be a realist as the second role, and to say to yourself, where could I be wrong? Where is the highest risk in what I think, right?
And there's 2 parts, what you just talked about in the roles is it's strategy and execution. The entrepreneur that's all grit and just runs out and sells, that's pure execution. Yes. If you don't pause and have strategy, there could be risk to the strategy where you could execute the hell out of it and still fail. And I see it all the time. One thing I think happens here if you actually just put the hat on to ask questions, you're ahead of most folks, because most folks don't want to go to that scary place. Another thing here is getting to the right layer of detail. And so where my mind goes, especially in the roles that you talked about, is what's the risk? Well, some people jump all the way to like, well, we don't have enough customers. It's like, okay, hang on, like you're 10 layers ahead. You have 0 customers. So let's go back to the early risks. Like, does anyone even care about the problem you're trying to solve for them? Like, this is where getting some sense of hierarchy and asking the tough questions. Like, don't go to the vanity style of like, are we making money yet? You know, all the way to the top. You have to peel back the onion to get into what's really happening through your concept and what you're thinking through.
Yeah.
Hey, we do have one question that came through.
Go ahead.
I don't know if you guys want to answer that quick before we move
let's do
on.
it.
Wendy
Take it,
asked,
Robert.
yeah, can you chat a little bit more on the business model canvas? It's the first time I'm hearing that phrase.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'll step back in opportunity theory.
Yeah.
I'll give you the high level because there's tons of stuff out there that probably even articulates it better. Business Model Canvas is a tool, I believe, created by Strategist that lays out your entire business model, and they do it in terms of concepting and prototyping in a visual one-page map. And so it lays out a couple distinct parts of how you create value for a customer, and then how you extract the value, and then all the things you have to do to actually build that value behind the scenes. And so it lays out operationally what you do and how you communicate and deliver value to your customers through your value proposition, including revenue and cost streams. And so perhaps we'll do a whole session on that. There's tons of good materials out there. You know, to me, Strategist, they have a book, Business Model Generation. That was my epicenter that I picked up 10 years ago, and I continue to drive with clients today. Anything to add there on Business Model Canvas, right?
I think you mean strategizer, not strategist.
Strategizer. What did I say? Strategist. Yes, Strategizer. Sorry, I plugged
Yeah,
the wrong
I dropped the
company.
link. I dropped the link in the chat there. So
there you go.
Perfect. Yeah. It's good stuff. Appreciate the question.
Great question.
Yeah,
and just like she's asking about, hey, what are the things that fit in each of these bubbles, right? We're not getting into those details right now, but there are tons of stuff that fit in here in the strategy. You know, there's different dimensions of risk. We address all that stuff. You know, desirability. Do people want your product? Feasibility.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
Can you do it?
When actually, I'll come back to the business model canvas. One of the ways that we extract risk and questions, and again, there's no perfect way, and Ryan talked about all the tools. The business model canvas is a really great tool for it. And so when you do check it out, it compartmentalizes the aspects of your concept. Sometimes we'll run through an exercise where we'll go box by box and say, what's the riskiest part of this? And this could be the revenue model. This could be the channel that we're getting customers. Oftentimes it's customer segments and value proposition because we're working with a lot of startups. That's the core, that's the epicenter. But that's one way to use the tool inside of this model to generate those questions and those risks that sometimes we use.
Yeah, I love it. I think the output of this, you know, before we go to the next swing in the loop, the output of this to me is risk should drive you towards questions. And those questions, I refer to them as critical questions, like the most important question we need to answer right now. And if we don't answer this question, then like the whole business could be junked, you know, right? Like what's the critical question you need to ask right now? You need to get an answer to.
Yeah. And for those of you that are familiar with Lean Startup, they have a very simple, similar approach. It's very in the weeds and tactical to when you're in execution, and it actually brings us to this next piece of discovery, which, you know, Ryan, take us through this. I know there's multiple layers of discovery, but what do we mean here, and how do we think about it?
Yeah, so we're coming down. So, okay, you've got your vision for where you want to go. You've got your theory of how you think you could get there, about where the opportunity is. You've been vulnerable enough with yourself to ask, hey, where could I be wrong? What's the critical question I need to answer right now? What's the biggest assumption I have? And then you're going to come around and figure out, okay, I have a question. How do I go about answering that? Right. And this is when we're doing discovery. And there's two different ways. There's only two ways of doing discovery. There's two ways to answer critical questions. One is through exploration. And when we say exploration, it's you're learning new material. So these could be customer interviews. This could be secondary research where you're doing market analysis. It could be competitive research. It could be looking at the data you have and finding and answering the question you're looking for in the data. It could be a lot of different ways to explore and find out. And we value, like on this side, the customer interview side, the customer research side, that human touch that Robert talked about being so critical and undervalued by tons of people. Because we've, on the last session, it was about, hey, we're afraid to go talk to customers. That's what that is, right? So that exploration part of discovery.
Yep.
Where you're,
and I see some folks get this wrong where they forget about exploration. That's where I see people, they take their opportunity theory sort of embedded in them and they say, no, there's something here, and they move right to experimentation. And so this is where we think it's a little different than lean startup. It's the same methodology and principle, but lean startup's a little bit more like, go build it, get it out there, when maybe, depending on the risks and questions you pulled out, maybe building first isn't the right path. Maybe exploring the problem area becomes real important. And so we're big proponents of, in our last session, like you said, like, get out, talk to people who you think are going to be your customers. Make sure you really understand it, because if they don't care, it doesn't matter how cool it is what you build. Like, you're going to have some flawed data when that comes back.
Yeah. So exploration helps you build a better theory, and experimentation just gives you true or false. It just tests whether your theory is right or wrong, right? So experimentation, this is where lean startup stuff kind of lives, and it's more narrow. You're trying to answer something in a very narrow way to get people to do something or not. Will they? Yeah. And there's all sorts of stuff to unpack on there on, hey, what's a good threshold for an experiment, right? All right, moving on to learning.
Moving us. So yeah, we're exploring or we're experimenting in how we do that. We're coming around the loop. What's happening here? Why are we calling out learning in particular?
Yeah. So just like on the other side of the circle, where you have to come down and start questioning yourself, that vulnerability is super important. And I think that vulnerability is really important to carry over to this step, because after you do whatever you do on the discovery side, if you're doing customer interviews, if you're doing experiments, if you're doing, some people do surveys, there's danger there, but whatever you're doing in that discovery phase, what it's going to give you is data. It's going to give you data and observations, and you got to be really careful about how you interpret those. So this learning phase is all about, how do I turn what I'm observing, the data I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, to insights? How do I translate that? Why are they actually doing that? Or am I still making an assumption about what they're saying or what they're implying?
Yeah, to me, this piece, the reason it gets its own space in our loop is I come back to documentation and actually talking about it. You wouldn't believe how many teams and entrepreneurs, they start this loop and they're doing really well. They document their concept, like, oh yeah, this is risky. We're going to go explore. We're going to go experiment. And then they never turn the corner on learning. They never stop to say, what did this tell us? And they don't then kind of complete the loop to update it. Like, I think of a specific project I just worked on where I was helping a group, a startup based in Europe, and they had done research. They were doing the first part of the loop. And I asked them, like, all right, tell me about what happened after you were like leaving the discovery parts of these cycles. We just stopped. Like, they had it all on these whiteboards and they never did this synthesis of the data. They never stopped and said, wow, that tells us this, or this changes what I'm thinking about it. And so they didn't learn anything. They did all the hard work. They got to the end, and then I guess we still have our same opportunity theory, and then we don't know what to do. We see it all the time.
Yeah. And we've had, we often will do discovery in pairs. And why do we do that? Yeah. Because you're hearing different things, right? And we've had this happens often. It's why we do it, is you get out of that interview or whatever discovery you're doing, if you're not talking about it. And actually, I heard this, you heard this. Well, that's where the real insights happen, is those discussions and making space just for that synthesis step, just to distill and maybe disagree and discuss, hey, what did we actually learn? What questions do we still have? And then it brings us all the way back to the top of the loop, which is our learning should drive a better theory.
Yep. And mindsets, that's another thing that just triggers for me is we always say at Headway, strong opinions loosely held. Like, when you're doing this kind of work, creating something new, if you're anchoring to your opportunity theory or to any type of execution, you're actually eliminating the possibility of you making things better. And so like when you get into this space, you almost have to, I know you say it, Ryan, like suspend belief, like forget everything you know and just take what's in front of you to try and influence some of that learning to complete the loop. And so so this is our loop. We added some elements in here. Ryan, what's going on with this? We have theory and we got unknown reality. Where does this fold in on the visual for the folks today?
Yeah. So if we just take a big step out, you have your vision. Then the second layer in the middle is your theory about how to get there. But what we talked about is the type of problems we're solving in product and strategy and innovation and startups. That's an unknown space, right? It's not a math equation. It's an unknown space. So the reason that we're doing discovery, that we're going around this loop, is because there's a dissonance. There's a mismatch between what we believe to be true and what reality is. And that reality is cloudy. And the faster we go around this loop, we can start to close that gap between what we believe to be true and what's actually true. And when we get those two in harmony, that's when the magic happens. And disaster happens when you're this far apart and you're just making all assumptions, right?
Yeah. I think this is why corporations struggle to innovate. And so I'm speaking from my own experiences. They do okay with opportunity theory. Maybe they start to get into experimentation, but maybe they only go through this loop once or twice. And then they want to know, okay, is my vision done yet? And so I've seen and interacted with these executives that are like, just plan it out, lay it out. Tell me what this product we're going to have in a year. And it's like, they're ignoring the loop. They're truth in our model, they're ignoring reality. And so for those of you who've seen or been a part of that, what happens? They don't dip into the water, the deep end of this reality, and they end up on this straight path to good execution and zero effectiveness. They're almost like guaranteeing failure by not digging into discovery and learning as you're building something new. It's just, this is really hard, ambiguous stuff. And so I've seen it quite a bit in the corporate space specifically.
Yeah. So as we think about, hey, how do I apply this to, what's the takeaway for me, for all of you attending and watching later? What's the takeaway?
Yeah.
You know, if I were you, I would look at this model and I'd put myself in it and say, hey, what's the vision is the same thing as outcome, right? What's the outcome I'm really trying to achieve? Where am I really trying to go? What are the different, then moving down to opportunity theory, what are the different ways I think I can get there? Who's the customer? What's the business model? All of those things. What's the journey I think that I'm trying to drive them towards? Looking at that opportunity theory, what the next thing you're going to do is you're going to come out with assumptions and ask yourself, where's the biggest risk in those assumptions, right? That's going to bring you to a question about, hey, what should I need to go learn? And being vulnerable, being willing to do that, and then putting a plan in place to go do that discovery. What's the appropriate kind of discovery I need to do right now? Is it interviewing? Is it an experiment, right? Yep. Coming out of those experiments, those discovery sessions with data, and then suspending that belief again about, coming out of the water now, what do those observations mean? And what are those insights how do those insights change where we go and where we think the opportunity is? And the funny thing, Robert, is that a lot of people look, prototypes are sexy, right? Like you get into that stuff and it's like, I got this idea, my light bulb idea, and everyone's going to love it, but I'm not going to show it yet. It's not ready. Right. And let's just build it. Then they'll like it. All of those temptations.
That one makes me laugh. We'll build it and then they'll like it.
Yeah.
If I had a nickel.
But what you're really doing, if that's your mindset, what you're really doing is you're just staying in opportunity theory. And you haven't even left yet, right? The question is not how good is your idea. The question is how many times what's your cycle rate through this? So if we think about metrics, how do we measure innovation? How do we measure the success of our teams? We think that the faster you are looping through here, the more you're going to learn, the more aligned with reality you're going to be, and the better you're going to be at being able to predict the future and what people want and why they want it.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up like tactics. How do you use this? Like, obviously it's a thinking model. And so I know we brought up some tools that we use as a part of this. For me, like, honestly, when I use this, like, am I in this every minute, every hour of every day? Probably not, but I come back to it regularly as sort of a gut check, because trust us, we get it. Like, you're in the weeds, you are doing building, explore, experimentation. Like, you got to be heads down for that. And so when I think about where's the value, is like, have this sort of as the North Star for the big picture, where we get that you just got to be scrappy at times and go do certain things. You're going to get pulled in different directions. And so I use this almost as my like come up for air. Like, where do I think am I ignoring good practice here? Like, am I in pure execution like you talked about? And so for me, it's more of a centering tool of the big picture, knowing that, this is clean. Oh, look how nice. 5 elements with a nice perfect circle. It doesn't look like that in practice. And so for me, it's like, it's a good prompter for me to ask me some of those tough questions. And that's how I think about it. And that's why I was excited to share it with you today, Ryan, and how we did this.
Yeah, no, I hope this is helpful for you guys. No matter where you are right now with either your idea or you already have customers along that whole journey, in our mental model, you still fit on here. Like, your outcome might be different than anyone else's stuff. What your theory is might be different depending on what you're trying to achieve. But I think when we sit down to somebody and we can put things together. You're somewhere in here right now. And I think about, even if you just go build stuff, even if you were just to do waterfall stuff, right?
Yeah.
You're still going around this loop. But you're only going to go once, and you're going to leave opportunity theory at the very end, and you'll do one loop, and you're going to learn the hard way at the very end that like you were super far apart, right?
Yeah. 100%. Good stuff. Yeah. If there's any additional questions on the chat, or anyone who wants to come in, share ideas or where they're at, their experiences going through this, again, this is exploring product to us, is engaging with you guys as our community, and covering topics that Ryan and I live in, day out. And we know it's messy. Cue awesome elevator music. Outro. Right. Okay, I see one coming in from Tim. Tim asks, what is the ideal time frame to complete a loop through the model? It's a great question. And so I'll take it first, Ryan, and then I want to know where your mind goes here. I'll give you the shitty answer first. It depends. We talk about speed, but it also depends on what questions are you trying to answer. And so this really depends on how you tee up the risks and how risky it is. And so like what you're sort of asking here is, when is enough learning to a degree? And we actually ask that question almost every week when we're in on projects, like, are we learning at a fast enough clip? My experience is, like, if you're far along in building and testing features, like pure lean startup, cycles can be very, very fast, like hours, days. When you're doing new concept generation, most of my experience is that the cycles tend to be a bit more daily and weekly in terms of how we learn and kind of come back to like what we're thinking. So we do quite a bit of that explore type research where we're interacting with potential customers through interviews. It's almost like we're doing a micro loop when we do an individual interview, and then like a weekly loop of like, what did we learn this week to pick up that traction? And so what we try and do is hold ourselves accountable on that daily, weekly model when we're doing explore. Experiments in other space can be fast, but if you're launching a whole new big feature, big product, those cycles can be a bit longer. I don't know if that lights something for you, Ryan, and how you think about speed and ideal time frame.
Yeah, I think the loop question, it really depends, to agree with Robert, it really depends on what question you're trying to answer. Right? Like right now, because we launch ventures from scratch, like from idea, from vision, we can build the whole company. And we're doing that right now with clients. So examples are, hey, I need to test our acquisition strategy, right? Can we pull people in to the channels? Is our value prop resonating? What what's the cost of acquisition? Those are questions, right? That's exactly the kind of question you want to go answer. Sometimes we can answer that very fast, right? You can get a Facebook ad up. I can do, landing page tests. We can do that stuff pretty quick. It depends on what you're trying to learn. Sometimes.
And so here, I got an example too. I'm working on a project right now, completely new concept. We're going from scratch. And so what we're doing to start is we're staying completely in the problem space and what we're exploring. And so we're doing a couple things. We're talking to experts in kind of the space, and then we're setting up interviews with who we think our customers are. And so for us, our loops are on that daily, weekly piece. And so this is actually something I'm going to be going and executing next week, is I'm going to have multiple interviews a day where I'll kind of be doing this loop. But really, in terms of the entrepreneur we're working with, it's going to be that weekly loop of, okay, we talked to 10 or 20 folks. This is what we learned. Here's what we have to change. And then we make a decision. Does that question still exist? Or can we move to the next question in what we test? And it really is a situational thing for how you decide on priority.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't want to loop too fast. Like, honestly, there's really big decisions on what customer segments you go after. That kind of question, you want to make sure that you answer it. You want to get the right answer to that. If you just do 3 interviews and make a decision, what's your confidence level in that?
Yeah.
Right. So, often when we're really selecting a customer segment, it's not just a day. It could be, 2, sometimes depends on if you want just interviews, if you want interviews plus quant data, it depends on what your confidence level needs to be. And when you feel like you're getting to repeatable answers. Oh, people are starting to say the same thing, right? Because people ask us, hey, how many interviews is enough? There's no answer to that, right? It's like when I start hearing the same things over and over, boom, and the patterns start to emerge, that's when you know, right?
Yeah. And Eric, I appreciate the comment from C2 Staffing. You actually triggered something for me of bringing structure to this, because the crux, underneath this, the reality when you're doing this work is usually you're doing it within a team. Maybe you're on your own, but even within a team. So laying it out, like you talk about rigor and structure, for us, this is a communication model, because this stuff is, again, it's theory-esque. And so sometimes it's hard to communicate that. And so to me, one way you could even use this is simply to help stakeholders, whether it's your co-founders, team members that you're working with, on how you're thinking about things. That's another superpower in this thinking model, in addition to the execution and the rigor that you talked about. But thank you for your comment.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I really think that the questions you ask are the most important thing. Your theory can be, like Robert said in the beginning, your theory's sketchy. You really don't know much about what the reality. You only have so many inputs and data points. And what that drives you towards is what the most important thing we feel is, what's the critical question that you're trying to answer right now? That's so important.
Yep. Yeah, feel free to hit us with more questions today or continuously. We had our social handles up in the beginning. We're very reachable. We engage quite a bit, like I said, with the community, and we're constantly meeting with new entrepreneurs and ideas and doing evaluations. So stay in touch as we go through these, and make sure to keep attending. We'll be covering more and more as we go through the year.
Oh, we got a new question.
That was a good one.
What's the value for us in sharing our model? Oh, I love the question. This gets into the real good stuff. Is it part of your cycle? Oh, nice. With customers. Oh, yeah, maybe to a degree. The honest answer is this is a combination of kind of marketing and connection with the community is how I see it. The other real answer is, as Ryan hit on it, we know that our model is imperfect to a degree. And so this is us sort of testing our model as well. We want to make sure we know it and we think about it. The most fun in this is Ryan and I are in tune with this model. We have disagreements and we have different viewpoints on things. And so what's cool is, for us, why do we share this? We want to share that in between all these very clean lines is a ton of ambiguity and a ton of questions and probably debates and arguments and different interpretations. And we think it's important that everyone knows that. Ryan and I get sort of tired of the, A plus B equals C style of here's the way to build a business, when we know it just doesn't happen like that. And so transparency is kind of if I had to put it into one word, that's my value for sharing this, is see how the meat gets made, sort of a thing.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And
Yeah,
is it this is a distillation. This model, this visual, is one of many mental models, right? We have to use in this type of work, when we're launching innovation, there's so many mental models you need. And when you look at all of what's out there, and you distill it down, it's all about learning. And then what's a learning model look like? And we think this is it. So this is partly our contribution to the community. It's a thank you to all the other stuff we've seen. This is our contribution back. Hey, this is how we think it really works. And it's in flux. If we change it, change it. And are we using this? There's different ways you could apply this. You can apply this with, and we've done it. We've applied it with, boards and actually like moving cards around. Done that with sticky notes and doing that kind of interaction as well. But the other way you could use it is mentally. Like in my mental model, whether with clients we're doing the sticky note kind of stuff or not, this is always happening every day, going around the loop. Am I asking the right questions right now? Right? Is there a faster way to learn this? Is that what the customer really said? When you go backwards, you think about if you and maybe someone you work with, maybe you have different perspectives on what you think, which way you guys think you should go. I think we should go this way or that way. You can actually use this model to walk backwards on the loop. Start with opportunity theory with your team, walk backwards and ask your peers, hey, what data led you to that conclusion? What observations led you to that conclusion? And it'll bring you into their experiences. It'll bring you into what they've seen, the data points they've seen. Maybe they have different experience or data you don't have, right? So doing that as a team and helping to understand each other's perspectives to build a better theory, to build a better idea of what we should do, is also something that we value.
Yeah.
All right.
Tim.
Yeah, we have a question from Tim. Just trying to mind the time here.
Yep. So Tim asks us, what are some examples of questions that people want to ask that are too big, that perhaps need to be broken down further and before going through discovery? Oh yeah, and this is what we hit on earlier. So too big it can be a combination of things. It can be combining multiple elements or going to a question that's not risky yet. And so the first example that comes to my mind, it's because it's one that I'm dealing with this week to a degree, is working with entrepreneurs. They have a solution concept that they want to take to market, and they're starting to ask, like, how much can we charge for this? And to us, it's like, well, wait, let's go back, let's unpack it. Like to them, they're almost jumping to the end of like combination of how much money am I going to make, and like where's the customer pay and all that, and that's great. So we're actually peeling back that question of how much can you charge into, well, wait, who is this thing for? And so we go all the way back again. Humans are at the center. Customer segments. And sure, we could shed some light on the question of like, well, what are people paying to solve that problem today? But that's not a core challenge for us when we're trying to de-risk, And so when I think about it, we're trying to pull back into, does anyone even care about this to even pay money for it? Forget about the number. And so we hear like prices often and scale and how much reach, like all that efficiency stuff comes later. It's really, especially when doing new ventures, how do you go from initial concept and deliver it for one person before you can answer all those add-on elements in terms of risk? That's how I think about that one, with one example that came right to mind.
Love it.
Thanks for the question, Tim.
All right. Well, if we have any more questions, be sure to throw them in the chat or the Q&A. Otherwise, I don't know, Robert and Ryan, if you just want to share, I guess, the future of exploring product. I know this is kind of our first episode or conversation, I should say. Maybe talk about what your plans are for the year and the hopes to help people with product strategy.
Yeah, so Ryan and I, we have our ideas and our debates, so we want to keep that as a part of it. But we want to bring in other folks and their experiences. So a big influence for us this year is going to be bringing in folks to interview. And so this is going to be a combination of entrepreneurs, people who are writing books on different subjects around strategy in the product space and new ventures, and other people executing, just like you guys who are listening in. And so I can't share some names yet of folks we almost have confirmed on the docket, but there's some names in there that are really exciting that we think are going to bring even more value and more perspective, and pick their brain, to a degree. And that's where the Q&A will be fun. Ryan and I are almost going to be joining the Q&A. Like, we're excited to meet some of the people we have lined up. And so just being able to pepper them with, like, how did you do it? Why do you get there? How do you really think about things? Like, that's kind of at the core of what I hope to get to this year by bringing people in.
Yeah,
Anything to add there, Ryan?
We're excited for exploring product, and it's about being on a journey together, right? Whether you're in a corporate innovation team, trying to launch something there, or you're in a startup, or you just have an idea. We think that let's explore product together, and that's going to be hearing from different perspectives and hearing different stories. I think that's super valuable. We're going to bring that. We're going to want to bring that this year. Some people that we respect, we're going to have on here as well. So we're excited to have you join us and stay connected. Subscribe, and if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to hit Robert and I up on Twitter if we could pull that slide up.
Sure.
Yeah, feel free to reach out, ask us anything. Thanks so much for coming.
Cheers, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Ryan. We appreciate you sharing all your wisdom experience today. And obviously we all know we're all students at the same time as we're going through all these journeys, just trying to learn how to be better at what we do and to help other people do what they do better. So thanks again, everybody, for hanging out, asking questions, and supporting what we do here at Headway, and now exploring product as a new endeavor. So